It's a very broad question, though. More specifically, it's, I guess, in Australia, our own context. So what do you think Christians are called to do in the face of what is happening in Australia? So you might be wondering, you might be living in a rock right now and under a rock, isn't it? Not in a rock. Under a rock. And you might, Australia's great at the moment. But here are some issues that, you might be thinking about. An attack on our freedom of speech compared to, let's just say, the 90s. Christianity is declining. Church attendance is going down. Deterioration in values. It seems our values are disappearing, getting worse. The debate between what's moral and what's cultural, that's lots of issues. And being able to practice our faith and not be attacked for discriminating. For example, Christian schools having to employ, anyone and everyone, that kind of thing. We just want to practice our faith as a Christian school. But if I'm told I have to, it's on principle, and I'm told I have to employ all these different types of people that don't even have the faith, then, I'm discriminating, so there's that issue as well. All right, I've had enough of that.
I don't have to do any hand actions today, so I don't need this. It's all good. These are my thoughts on the subject. I ask myself, is our nation better now than it has been in the past? And I reckon it depends on when you compare it to, all right? Like I'd say, I was born in the 80s. Life was pretty good. 90s, I had my childhood, and, there was things that reflecting on that period that, we could do. I don't know. It's a few things. I'd say it's better. I was just thinking within students, something like if you're up in the know on what kids are saying these days, they're talking in digits now. They've gone from letters, LOL, RFFL, oh my LMAO. They've gone from letters now to digits. Now it's a 41, 93, a 67. 67 is up there. And I actually thought that's probably been an improvement since when I was a kid, because we had another double-digit letter starting with 6, and it wasn't as good or as positive as 67. So there's been some improvement. But let's just say you want to compare society to, a lot of people wondering what 6'7" is, eh? Let's just say it's a cool thing. If something's cool, you can now say it's 6'7", okay? Let's compare it to 1500s. Is our society better off? I'll say much. Let's just say biblical times. Is our society better off? Definitely, right? So it's perspective, is it not? So when this question is asked, that's what's gone through my mind in the face of what's happening in Australia. Well, I think we'll compare ourselves, let's just say, to a decade ago. Well, there's some issues that are now apparent that weren't so prevalent back then. And then I thought, okay, we want to make things better. But how do we make a nation better? How do you make a nation better? I thought, well, who are the only people that can make the decisions to make a nation better? And they're politicians, right? So really, you have to get into politics if you really want to contribute towards making a nation better. And then that brings on a question, should the church be involved in politics? This has been a question that's been debated for hundreds of years, if not thousands. And the interesting thing about a Baptist church, one of the reasons we became a Baptist church is because we believed in separation of church and state. there's times in our history where the church, particularly the Catholic Church, has been in charge of the people, regardless of what their faith is. So the church was in government. And a lot of Christians had an issue with that, as they should. Well, that's the question, Should, to me it's a gimme of a no, but the questions are, should the church be in charge of the people as a nation, so it should be government, and should the government be in charge of the church? So if you want church in charge of government, you have to get the reverse as well. And it's ludicrous to think that's a yes. Because nowadays, well, which church? Which denomination? So that's what it means to be separated by church and state. That's actually a distinctive of being in a Baptist church. But we have, let's just say, convoluted this definition of meaning, what it means to separate church and state. Because I looked at this quote, and this is good. Separation of church and state was never meant to separate God and government. That's two totally different things. So someone once said, the church is to be prophetic, not partisan. Prophetic, not partisan. Which brought some thoughts, some questions. When it comes to the church, what is our mission? What is the purpose of the church? Number two, as a church, how can we be most influential? Because that's what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to influence people to come back to God. What are the dangers? And then what would be a balanced approach? So I just want to go quickly into 4 of these, and this may spark a question that you have or some discussion afterwards. What is our purpose as a church? I keep on saying that Scripture tells us the church has 5 purposes. We're to worship, we're to fellowship, we're to disciple, we're to minister, and we're to evangelize. 5 purposes. But if you could choose one verse to summarize or to clearly articulate the purpose of a church, what would you choose? What would you choose? You might see Matthew 28. You might straight away go on Matthew 28. Yep. Go make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and teaching them to observe all things. Or Luke 4:43. Maybe the purpose is just simply put, proclaim the kingdom of God. That's fair enough. Or Ephesians 3:10. That's an interesting one. I asked this to ChatGPT and they brought up Ephesians 3:10. I said, if you could choose one verse, what would you choose? Ephesians 3:10. Read it, but it's about revealing God. I don't have it up on the board, by the way. Revealing God. You have to do that in your own time. Or, my choice, I like this one, reconcile the world to himself, found in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 18. What would be yours? Maybe we can have a discussion later. Or, agree or disagree. But what is our purpose as a church? Why are we here as a local church? Is it to be in politics? Or is it to even influence politics? Or is it even, does that come under any of these umbrellas? And then I thought, how are we as a local church most influential? Well, I think you can only be influential if you have a difference, if people see a difference. And what do people see a difference or should see a difference through Christians? And I thought, well, it should be through the power that they express, right? Not necessarily the power of healing or the power of miracles, but even the power to be peaceful when your world has been turned upside down. That requires power. To forgive someone when, that could never be done from a normal person that's living in the world, right? That involves power. And then let's just say we did have that power and we got into politics. I was wondering, what would people see from the church? Would they see more of a political alignment rather than, the spiritual authority that we have? Obviously, our spiritual authority is Jesus. So would they see more of the political side of things rather than the spiritual? In other words, would it take the focus of Jesus? At the same time, I thought Scriptures instructs us to stand for biblical values. We are to speak out against biblical values, and these are just a few verses that I plucked out. Micah 6:8, I think it's talking about justice. James 1:27, Proverbs 14:34, lots of scriptures. And we see characters in the Bible that we read about that they're standing up for their values in the society and even to the government in some cases. What are the dangers if the church does get involved in politics? Or is there a chance of losing its moral authority? In other words, we're trying to increase morals, but is it just for the sake of having a better society? Or is it because of Jesus Christ and what he's done for us? Standing up for biblical values. There's a chance that it might alienate those it's called to reach, because I guarantee if we all get up in a line and we say which political party we support, I doubt we would all agree. But just think about mainly America. There's just really two parties, and there's some pastors just preaching supporting one party. Imagine the damage that would do to someone listening in the congregation and supporting a different party. And then, the discussion would have to come up, well, if you support that party, can you really say that you are a Christian? Because the things that they do or the things that they stand for, it's terrible. So all sorts of debate, right? And then, is there a possibility that we would confuse the gospel, which we're here to proclaim, instead of being a powerful force, Romans 1, we're unashamed of the gospel because it has the power to save. It's more of an ideology. Or could it be? Is there a danger of turning into an ideology where the gospel is used to transform society as a culture, as a practical societal means, rather than a transformation from the inside out? So we alter our behavior as a society rather than be transformed on the inside, which we need. And then I thought John 18:36. God, Jesus himself said, my kingdom is not of this world. And so they tried to do the same thing back then. They wanted Jesus to take charge of his kingdom right then and there here on earth. So their vision of the kingdom was a worldly one where everything was sweet. Well, the Romans would no longer be a problem for the Jews. Politics. And then we come to, there has to be some kind of balanced approach. What is the balanced approach? And this is my opinion. This is what I think. So this is what I'd be curious to hear if there's any questions on this. This is my last slide, by the way. Well, I think the church should not get involved in politics as an institution, well, surely that should not stop individual Christians from being part of politics. Because what would we do without the likes of, Martin Iles, I thought Lyle Shelton, Damien Wild, I'm not sure if you know him. Like, these guys are Christians, good Christians, and they're making an impact, a positive impact for our society. America, you could have said Charlie Kirk. You can't say that now, obviously, but, well, you can say Turning Point, right? Whatever. It's still making an impact, and all those people that have taken up after him. So they're using him individually, and they're part of the church, but it's more of an individual conviction and a calling rather than a calling for a body to do that. So I thought here, well, if you're individual Christians, if you want to engage politics, do it. If you're called, so you do it through your convictions, do it through humility, of course, and definitely through prayer, and what you're trying to do is seek the common good. But it would take you away from the local church. If you watch the funeral of Charlie Kirk, for instance, his pastor was one of the people who spoke a eulogy, and he confessed, he hardly saw Charlie at church. He probably managed to get to church, maybe a few times a year. It has an impact, but if God has called you to do that, it's very unique. You have to be chosen to do it. And obviously that comes with talents and gifts. But the local church, as an institution, as a body of believers, is there an obligation for everyone to get involved? I don't think. However, I think we should all engage the moral and spiritual dimensions that are impacted through the public issues that are being raised in our society. So that's with the intention of pointing people to Christ. It's very important. It has to all come back to pointing people to Christ, because that's why we're here. We're in the ministry of reconciliation. It comes back to what is our purpose as a local church. So that's where I stand on where the church should sit. And this is the interesting thing. There are some pastors that feel called to engage in politics. But I think there has to come to a stage in their life where I think you have to choose one or the other. You have to choose your local church, or you choose politics, because one will it's like 2 full-time jobs. You've got your flock that you take care of, or you've got social issues to advocate for. And that takes time, that takes effort. So it's interesting. I don't think there's a right or wrong on what we do as individuals. But to demand someone else to do the same thing that God's calling you to do, that's a totally different thing. So that's where I stand on answering that question. And out of curiosity, are there any questions? Try to have questions, because I know there's lots of opinions. There's always lots of opinions. Well, there's none on Slido, so maybe I've got off scot-free with that one. All right. Well, thank you for your patience. Oh, no, sorry. Oh, one came through. Cool. I'll invite Peter up. Yeah. So just a comment, just a statement that being a witness is important, and agreeing that there's both a place for individuals and the local church. Great question. Thank you to the person that asked that, and I invite you any more. If you have a Christmas one, let me know. Lots of Christmas controversial stories out there. Love to do one in December. Otherwise, I would, if you've asked me one, by the way, it is on the list. I just do it when I feel God leading me to talk about that particular issue. So I might not answer it straight away, okay?